My name is David Ben-Amami, 28 years old, a soldier serving in the Israel Defense Forces. That morning felt like countless others, but within moments, it would become the day I died for 11 minutes. We were tasked with a reconnaissance mission. The sky looked ordinary, a pale blue brushed with sun, yet the ground beneath us hid a snare we couldn't see. The explosion came without warning, one instant steady. The next, a violent thunder. The improvised device detonated directly beneath us, lifting the vehicle into the air like a toy, tearing metal, splintering glass, throwing bodies and dust into the wind. I remember the force slamming me against the side, then darkness as the world twisted. I was told later that I was thrown 30 meters from the wreckage. My squad found me motionless. My chest had stilled. My heart had surrendered. No pulse, no breath. 11 long minutes of silence. But silence is not the absence of sound. It is its own presence. I became aware of it the moment I left my body. I hovered, seeing the chaos unfold below, the smoke rising. Men running, shouting my name, but their voices didn't reach me. Instead, there was a deep stillness, as though eternity itself had taken a breath. The weight of the earth no longer clung to me. My body was broken, yet I was free, lifted into something unknown. I glanced down, and the sight startled me. My own form lying crumpled, lifeless. Dust clung to my uniform, the insignia still visible. My face was pale, lips parted, eyes shut. Around me, medics pressed, pounding my chest, forcing air into lungs that no longer responded. Their urgency contrasted sharply with the peace enveloping me. No panic, no pain, just release. You could almost feel it, the way a heavy burden suddenly lifts from your shoulders. The air shifted. Or perhaps it was no longer air but another substance altogether. A subtle vibration pulsed through what I stood upon, though I realized there was no ground in any human sense. It was solid, yet alive, breathing energy that traveled into me. In that stillness, memories flickered, like flashes of lightning. My mother's voice at the Sabbath table, the feel of stone streets under my childhood feet, laughter with comrades, and then silence swallowed even those echoes, leaving only the awareness of being. I remember reaching instinctively toward light. At first faint, it grew until it became all I could perceive. It wasn't sunlight, not the pale reflection we know, but a living radiance that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. There was no source, no shadow, no edges. The light did not blind, it penetrated. Soft yet unstoppable. I felt it moving through me, exposing every hidden place, washing away fear. My first reaction should have been terror, but instead came awe. You know that moment when you stand before something so vast, so beyond, that your mind cannot contain it. That was the moment. The silence wasn't empty. It carried weight. Every fiber of me recognized eternity. No ticking clocks, no beating heart, no seconds passing, just an eternal now that stretched wider than galaxies. I realized with sudden clarity that I had stepped beyond time. The desert, the explosion, the shouts, they were still there, yet I was outside them, standing where past, present, and future dissolve into one. A sensation coursed through me, not wind exactly, but movement. I was being drawn forward, as though the light itself had reached out and was beckoning me closer. I felt both small and infinitely valued. My heart, or whatever my being, had become quivered with anticipation. Somewhere deep within, I knew this was not imagination. This was not a dream. It was the threshold. As I moved, a thought came unbidden. This is death. Yet it didn't feel like ending. It felt like unveiling, like stepping through a curtain into a reality that had always been present, but hidden. And then, almost like a whisper brushing against my spirit, came a realization. I was not alone. Something, or rather, someone was near. The stillness deepened, and with it, my awareness sharpened. Colors began to form in the light, subtle at first, then more vibrant than any spectrum I'd known. They weren't just seen, they were felt. Each hue carried emotion, peace in the gold, love in the crimson, purity in the white. They flowed around me, wrapping me in tenderness. My fear dissolved, replaced by a profound certainty that I was safe, utterly and completely safe. Below me, unseen by those still struggling over my broken form, angels moved. I didn't see wings, not in the way artists paint them, but I sensed presences vast, radiant, stronger than storms. Their nearness stirred reverence, as though I had stumbled into a realm where every being existed in perfect harmony with the Creator. One reached toward me, not to force, but to guide, and in that instant my being rose higher, leaving the dust and blood of earth further behind. That's when I noticed the boundary. Ahead, something shimmered, a threshold between two realities. Beyond it, I could almost glimpse shapes moving in brightness, but the detail remained veiled. My soul trembled because I knew instinctively that passing that line meant stepping fully into eternity. Part of me longed to cross, to taste the fullness, to never return. But another part hesitated, tethered to the unfinished business of earth. In that hovering moment, emotions tangled wonder, awe, sorrow. My mind, if you could call it that, filled with questions. Why me? Why now? Why this light? And yet I didn't speak, for no words were needed. The silence carried every thought, every whisper of my heart, and it seemed the light itself responded, as if listening patiently. I thought of my comrades scrambling in the dust, unaware that I was no longer lying among them but standing here. I thought of my family, my father's stern pride, my mother's quiet prayers. The weight of love anchored me, even as eternity beckoned. And then the silence deepened again, preparing me for what was coming next, the approach of the one who commands heaven and earth. In those 11 minutes, everything I thought I knew unraveled. War and duty, blood and dust, pride and fear, all stripped away. Only one truth remained. I had crossed the threshold of death, and nothing in this world could compare to what awaited on the other side. I drifted deeper into that realm where silence was alive and light had no source. The desert, the wreckage, the broken body that once carried me, they felt distant, like a dream slipping from memory. What filled me now was an invitation, a gentle pull forward, as though eternity itself reached out a hand and whispered, "Come closer." The tunnel wasn't a structure of stone or metal. It was made of stillness and radiance, a passage that seemed to narrow and widen all at once. You could feel its breath, like a heartbeat echoing across infinity. My first steps, or movements, for I no longer walked, but simply willed myself forward, were hesitant, but soon my hesitation gave way to awe. The silence here was different. It wasn't the dead quiet of an empty room. It was layered, full of meaning. Imagine standing beside a vast ocean at dawn, the waves hushed, the air trembling with anticipation. That's how it felt. Every moment seemed drenched with purpose, though no clock ticked. No measure of time existed. The light embraced me. It clung to me, not burning, not blinding, but sinking through every layer of who I was. I could sense its patience, as if it had been waiting for me since before my birth. It didn't ask questions, yet it knew everything. It revealed me to myself the secrets, the failures, the small kindnesses I had forgotten. All of it lay open, yet I didn't feel condemned. Instead, I felt seen, truly seen, in a way I had never experienced. The ground or whatever carried me pulsed with living energy. Each pulse carried peace, flowing up through my being. It was like inhaling air for the first time, after nearly drowning. I realized how starved I had been for this presence all my life. Chasing shadows, fighting battles, guarding borders, but never encountering the one beyond borders. At first, fear flickered. My soldier's heart tightened as if bracing for judgment. Yet the fear quickly melted, replaced by a deep surrender. It's hard to explain, but the tunnel felt like homecoming. The light didn't scold. It welcomed. Every inch closer stripped away another layer of hardness. My anger, my pride, even the resentment I carried from years of conflict gone, dissolved in radiance. I noticed sounds emerging, not as noise, but as tones woven into the light. They weren't voices in the human sense, more like harmonies that resonated directly within me. One tone carried hope, another carried love, another something I can only describe as truth. They surrounded me, filling the tunnel with an atmosphere so rich it seemed to sing creation's first song. The colors deepened too. Gold shimmered like sunrise over water, blue stretched endless as the heavens, and white so pure it made snow look dull. Each color touched me, soft and tender. They didn't just shine, they carried emotions. The gold whispered courage. The blue soothed my wounds. The white reminded me of innocence I thought I had lost forever. Somewhere within, a recognition stirred. This was not random. This was deliberate. I was being drawn closer, not only to light, but to presence. The tunnel wasn't just a passage, it was a preparation. I was being refined, cleansed of the dust of earth, before standing before the one whose gaze pierces soul and spirit. The further I went, the more the world behind me dissolved. Duty, rank, medals, uniforms, all stripped away as meaningless. None of it followed me. All that remained was my bare essence, naked before eternity. Yet strangely, instead of shame, I felt release. Imagine dropping a heavy pack after years of carrying it. That's how it felt. Still, there was weight in the air, a seriousness that pressed gently but firmly. The peace was real, but it wasn't shallow comfort. It carried authority. I knew instinctively, this was no ordinary encounter. I was approaching the throne of the universe, and nothing false could cross its threshold. That's when I began to sense him not yet visible, but present, like the moment before sunrise, when you feel the world shift, because the light is about to break. My heart, or whatever, had replaced my heart, throbbed with recognition. Every fiber of me whispered, he is near. You know those moments on earth, when everything slows down, when a child is born, or when danger passes by inches, or when you stand at a mountain's edge and realize your smallness. Multiply that by eternity, and you'll glimpse what I felt. I was small, yes, but I was not abandoned. I was treasured. The tunnel was proof that I was being carried somewhere purposeful. I wanted to speak, to ask where I was, but words had no place here. Questions were already answered in silence. All I could do was yield. My movements became effortless, as if I floated in the current of light. The boundaries of my old self blurred. I was no longer a soldier defined by war, but a soul defined by being known. Every sense was heightened. I could feel eternity pressing against me, smell a sweetness like blossoms in spring, though no flower grew, taste purity on my tongue, though no food existed. Even touch had transformed every ripple of light against me, felt like hands of comfort, reminding me I was not lost. And then something shifted. Ahead, the tunnel widened, the light intensified, and I knew, with absolute certainty, I was about to meet him. The stillness prepared me. The colors aligned in brilliance. The tones swelled like a chorus awaiting the conductor. All creation seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, I understood death wasn't an end. It was unveiling. A curtain pulled back to reveal the true stage. And the one waiting beyond was not a stranger. He was the reason I had been carried through war, through dust, through fire, through every step of life. I braced myself, trembling not with fear but with anticipation, for the light had become a figure approaching. The light that had surrounded me now condensed into a form. Out of the brilliance, a figure emerged, not walking as men walk, but moving with authority that seemed to command every particle of existence. My breath, or what replaced breath in that realm, caught in awe. I knew, without needing explanation, it was him. Jesus approached with a presence so vast it felt the universe bent toward him. His steps carried the gravity of eternity, yet each movement was gentle, tender, deliberate. His robe shone with a whiteness purer than snow. Not fabric, but living light woven together. His face glowed with glory, yet I could look at him without being blinded. And his eyes, oh, his eyes held depths beyond comprehension. Love so fierce it melted me. Sorrow so profound it broke me. The instant his gaze met mine, everything hidden within me surfaced. Thoughts I had buried, sins I had excused, secret motives I had cloaked, with pride laid bare, nothing was hidden. It wasn't condemnation, but exposure. My entire life replayed in a single heartbeat, every choice weighed, every intention revealed, and still, he looked at me with love. When he spoke my name, David, it wasn't sound, it was essence. Hearing my name from his lips felt like coming home to a place I had never known, but had always longed for. It resonated through my being, as if he was reminding me of who I truly was. Not the soldier, not the son, not the broken body left in dust, but the soul created before time. Emotion surged within me, a mixture of awe, relief. For the first time in my life, I understood the word Lord, not a title, not a phrase repeated in prayers, but the truth of who he is, the one who holds all authority in heaven and earth. My lips trembled as I whispered it, but even before I spoke, he already knew. His eyes searched mine, and I felt naked under their gaze, yet not shamed. Instead, I was invited. He allowed me to see myself in his, reflection broken, yet redeemable, unworthy, yet beloved. His presence was both a mirror and a balm. The sorrow in his eyes told me how much humanity's rebellion grieves him, yet the fire of his love burned unquenched. He reached out, his hand not as a gesture of greeting, but as an act of unveiling. When his hand extended, the tunnel around us shifted into a vast space where I could see beyond myself. It wasn't just about me, it was about creation, nations, eternity. His voice echoed with authority yet tenderness. You must listen. Time is short. As he drew nearer, the weight of his holiness pressed on me, not crushing but purifying. Every stain, every scar within me trembled under his gaze. Yet in that trembling, I felt the miracle of grace. He wasn't rejecting me. He was calling me deeper. The sorrow in his face was unmistakable. Tears shimmered like liquid light in his eyes, not weakness, but compassion, that held the pain of a world lost. I sensed the grief of a creator watching his children destroy themselves, and the love of a shepherd refusing to abandon even one. In that moment, every defense I had built as a soldier collapsed. Years of training to be strong, to hide fear, to endure pain, none of it mattered. Before him, I was a child. I longed to fall at his feet, to weep, to confess everything. Yet even before I could speak, he had already answered. The love in his gaze declared, I know, I forgive, I love. The silence around us thickened, as if the entire realm hushed to honor his presence. The tones I had heard earlier swelled into harmonies that seemed to bow before him. The colors brightened, reflecting his radiance. Angels, vast presences I had only glimpsed, stood still, reverent, waiting. All creation seemed to hold its breath. Then he leaned closer, his voice low yet resonant, a whisper that carried galaxies. September will bring the shaking that separates the wheat from the chaff. The words etched themselves into me like fire. They weren't simply spoken. They became part of me. I knew I could never forget them. I trembled, not with fear of him, but with the enormity of what he was declaring. His eyes locked with mine, and for a heartbeat that felt eternal, I saw the reflection of all mankind in his gaze. The brokenness, the rebellion, the pride, and his unrelenting desire to redeem. The presence of Jesus was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to turn away. Everything in me longed to stay here forever, to remain in this gaze where love and truth met. Yet I sensed he had more to show me. His eyes shifted, and suddenly the light around us began to transform, preparing to unveil visions I had not asked for but could not refuse. Still, in that moment, before the revelations began, I stood face to face with him, the one I had never expected to meet in this way, the one whose name I had rarely spoken except in distant prayers, and yet, he had sought me, called me, loved me enough to meet me in death itself. His words lingered inside me like fire etched onto stone. September will bring the shaking. I didn't need explanation. The weight of his voice carried the certainty of prophecy. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't metaphor. It was a decree. I stood trembling as the silence around us bent to those words, as though creation itself had leaned in to listen. His gaze pierced deeper, and I felt my soul unravel. The tunnel that had been bathed in radiant colors widened into a vast expanse. Above us, there was no sky, only living light that seemed to breathe. Around us, waves of eternity rippled, carrying with them truths I had never dared to touch. Jesus' expression was tender, but his eyes burned with urgency. The time of separation has begun, he told me. His voice was both whisper and thunder, gentle enough to calm my soul, strong enough to shatter the illusions of nations. The wheat and the chaff, the true and the false, will be revealed. Nothing hidden will remain hidden. As he spoke, I felt images pour into me, not in sequence but all at once, as though eternity had been condensed into a single vision. I saw shadows unraveling from the corners of the earth. Hidden deeds, secret plans, corruption buried deep. It was as if veils were being torn down. I realized that when he spoke of shaking, it wasn't only storms and disasters, it was exposure. Every heart, every system, every lie would be brought into light. The sorrow in his eyes deepened. So many claim my name, he said, but their hearts are far from me. They walk in the comfort of religion, yet have not surrendered to truth. This shaking will reveal who belongs to me and who does not. His words pierced me, because I knew he wasn't only speaking of others, he was speaking of me too. I remembered moments in my own life when I had hidden behind duty, behind excuses, behind pride, and yet, here in his presence, all excuses crumbled. He was truth itself, and nothing false could stand before him. My heart quaked, yet his love didn't withdraw. Instead, it pressed closer, demanding honesty, but offering grace. He lifted his hand, and the expanse shifted again. I found myself suspended above the earth, looking down on continents and oceans as if from a place beyond time. It was terrifying and beautiful. The planet spun quietly, but I could sense a tension in its atmosphere. I could see the wounds of creation, the weight of rebellion pressing on it. Jesus' voice surrounded me. When nations turn away from righteousness, creation groans. The earth was designed to reflect heaven. But when men rebel, even the ground trembles. His words rang with authority, yet his tone carried grief. I could feel his heartbreak over the way humanity had twisted what was given to us. As I watched, storms gathered over oceans, massive spirals of cloud and wind. But they weren't random. They moved with intelligence, shifting, like pawns on a board. Their patterns defied nature's rules, bending as though guided by invisible hands. I realized this was part of the shaking. He had spoken of the earth itself, responding, and unseen forces manipulating creation for purposes of destruction. Jesus' eyes remained on me. You must understand, what has been prepared in darkness will be revealed in light. Those who seek to control my creation, to weaponize the earth itself, are opening doors they cannot close. His words pulsed with both warning and inevitability. I felt overwhelmed. The weight of his gaze, the vastness of the visions, the urgency of his warnings, they pressed on me like a storm I could not endure. Yet even in that pressure, his love anchored me. He wasn't crushing me with knowledge. He was entrusting me with truth. I wanted to ask, why me? Why show this to a soldier lying broken in the desert? But even before I formed the thought, his answer was in his eyes. Because time is short, and my witnesses must rise. The silence thickened again, not empty, but filled with reverence. I sensed angels all around, watching, listening, waiting. Even they bowed before his words, as if heaven itself acknowledged the gravity of what he was declaring. The separation will not be comfortable, he continued. It will expose the heart. Those who trust in wealth, power, or systems will see their foundations crumble, but those who trust in me will stand unshaken. His hand moved slightly, and I felt a current of power flow through me, as if he was engraving this truth into my being. Emotions surged in me, fear, awe, hope, all intertwined. I realized his warnings were not to terrify but to prepare. He wanted his people ready, purified, awake. The shaking wasn't punishment for its own sake. It was a mercy, stripping away illusions so that truth could remain. I couldn't stop trembling. My soul burned with the intensity of his presence, and yet I longed for more. The tunnel of light had become the stage for revelation, and I sensed that what I had seen so far was only the beginning. His eyes held mine, unflinching, and his voice sealed the moment. Tell them, tell the world. September is not just another month, it is the dividing line. The moment his words settled into me, the expanse shifted again. I was lifted higher, though I no longer felt the strain of movement. It was as if I had become weightless thought, carried by his will. Below, the earth turned slowly, its oceans and continents draped in cloud. Yet my eyes were not limited to what satellites might see. I was perceiving through a lens of spirit. Physical landscapes and spiritual realities overlapped like two layers of the same map. Storms swirled across the planet, colossal in size, their edges sharp as blades. I recognized hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, but they were wrong. They didn't move according to the weather patterns I had learned in my training. These systems had intention. They shifted paths unnaturally, almost as if following orders. Lightning forked with eerie precision, striking specific regions, igniting flames that spread across nations. I trembled, and Jesus' voice filled the silence. Do you see? Creation is crying out, yet men think they are masters of it. They twist what I have given into weapons of pride. His eyes grew sorrowful as he gestured, and suddenly I was taken deeper into the vision. I found myself looking down upon hidden facilities, vast complexes carved beneath mountains, disguised as research centers. Inside, I saw scientists and officials working feverishly with machines, humming at frequencies that distorted the very air. They believed they were advancing human knowledge, but I sensed their ignorance. They were tampering with forces that did not belong to them. Waves of energy pulsed outward, bending weather, pulling at tides, even straining the thin veil between realms. Jesus' voice carried grief and authority together. What man calls progress becomes his downfall. They seek to play God with creation, not understanding that every action in the physical realm has consequence in the spiritual realm. His words, vibrated through me, and I shuddered as I realized the storms I had seen were not merely natural. They were manipulated, provoked by hands blinded by ambition and dark influence. The vision widened again. I saw rivers swelling, sweeping entire towns in sudden floods. I saw droughts spreading like fire, cracking the earth beneath villages that had once thrived. Crops withered, while other regions drowned in water. But even as I watched, I felt another force behind these extremes. It wasn't randomness, it was rebellion, echoing through creation itself. Jesus' face was solemn. When nations turn from righteousness, when they abandon justice and mercy, creation groans. The ground rejects their arrogance. The seas rise against their idols. The skies reflect their unrest. His voice was mournful, yet steady. It was not anger in the human sense, but the righteous sorrow of a creator watching his design exploited. I wanted to look away, but his hand steadied me. He wanted me to see. So I did, and what I saw made my spirit quake. Lightning storms gathered over entire continents. But I realized they weren't only storms of weather, they were storms of judgment, allowed to break through the atmosphere as signs to humanity. Tornadoes ripped across lands that had mocked his name. Winds screamed like warnings. The elements themselves seemed alive, groaning in protest against corruption. Yet amidst the chaos, I glimpsed something else. In certain regions, the storms halted suddenly, dissolving before they could strike. These weren't coincidences, they were places where humble people gathered to pray. I saw circles of believers kneeling in fields, lifting hands in surrender, and their prayers literally bent the path of destruction. The winds turned away, as though commanded by heaven. Jesus looked at me, his eyes burning with truth. My people must understand. Prayer is not empty ritual. It is the key that aligns heaven and earth. When they cry out in faith, the forces of destruction are restrained. But when they sleep, darkness gains ground. A pang of conviction struck me. How often had I thought prayer was weakness? How often had I relied only on strategy, weapons, strength? And yet here I was, witnessing storms obey the prayers of the faithful. In this realm, it was undeniable. The unseen shaped the scene. Jesus' tone shifted, carrying a sharper edge. Tell them to wake up. Tell them to seek me, not the systems of men, for the shaking will not spare those who mock my warnings. His voice wasn't rage, it was urgency, like a father raising his voice to save his child from running into fire. The vision pulled me closer to the Middle East. I saw shifting sands, trembling deserts, nations bristling with weapons. But before I could process what it meant, Jesus turned my gaze back to the storms. He wanted me to feel the truth fully. This shaking wasn't random. It was part of the unveiling. The earth itself was testifying, declaring that humanity had wandered too far. Men thought they could manipulate creation without consequence. But every machine they built, every experiment they ran, echoed into the spiritual, tearing seams they could not mend. I felt dread, yet also hope. For even as the storms raged, I remembered the circles of prayer, the families who bent their knees, the faithful who trusted beyond sight. They glowed like small flames in the darkness, resisting waves that should have swallowed them whole. Jesus placed his hand upon me, and peace steadied my trembling. His words sank deep. Do not fear the storms, fear the absence of faith. For faith can move mountains, calm seas, silence thunder. But without it, even the strongest walls crumble. I bowed my head, overcome. My heart, stripped of defenses, knew his words were not just warnings, they were invitations. Invitations for mankind to return, to repent, to believe. And I realized with burning clarity, this was why he had brought me here. The visions shifted again, and suddenly, the earth below me, narrowed to a strip of land I knew too well, the Middle East. From above, it stretched like an ancient scroll, deserts glowing with heat, cities pulsing with restless energy, borders drawn by blood and history. But now, I saw what human eyes could not. Invisible lines crisscrossed the region, shimmering with power. Some radiated with light, others pulsed with darkness. These were not boundaries of governments. They were spiritual battle lines. I felt the atmosphere thicken, as if two armies faced one another, unseen, yet undeniable. On one side, angels stood tall, radiant, their presence vibrating like the hum of 1,000 voices in harmony. On the other, shadowed figures writhed, their forms jagged and shifting, their whispers slithering into the hearts of men. Between them, humanity moved unaware. Leaders signing papers, generals drawing plans, soldiers marching, each convinced their actions were their own. Yet I saw clearly. Every decision was influenced, tugged, swayed by the forces surrounding them. Jesus' voice broke through the weight of what I was seeing. The ancient hatred rages still. What began with Cain and Abel burns now between nations. The conflict you see in the physical is only the shadow of the true war. His words carried a sorrow so deep it pressed upon my soul, yet also an authority that could silence armies. The vision zoomed closer. I saw war rooms filled with maps and screens. Leaders argued, voices sharp, their eyes clouded, though they believed themselves wise. Behind them, demons leaned in, whispering strategies of vengeance and pride. Their words were not heard with ears, but felt as impulses, desires for power, fear of weakness. And I saw angels, tall and resolute, pressing against these whispers, shielding some, restraining others. Where prayers rose from faithful lips, angels gained strength. Where silence reigned, darkness crept further. I watched as lines of fire stretched from Iran to the Mediterranean, flickering with tension, as though the land itself carried centuries of wounds. Above Jerusalem, angels formed a radiant barrier, shields lifted, wings spread like walls of light. Their stance shook me. They were not fragile, not delicate, but warriors, fierce and unyielding. They knew what was at stake. The demons, too, gathered in ranks, their shadows seeping into corridors of power. I saw them influence decisions that would set nations aflame, manipulating pride, feeding fear. Yet I also saw them recoil when confronted by prayer. A grandmother whispering scripture in her kitchen, a child kneeling beside his bed, soldiers crying out in foxholes. Their prayers cut through darkness like swords. Jesus looked at me, his eyes blazing with truth. This war is not of flesh and blood. Men see politics, religion, land. But I tell you, the true battle is for souls. Every conflict, every law, every treaty hides a deeper struggle. Light against darkness, truth against deception. His words resonated so strongly, I felt my spirit quake. The vision widened. I saw Washington, Moscow, Beijing, capitals of the world. Behind the polished speeches and flags, the same invisible forces moved. Some leaders sat in silence while shadows coiled around them, whispering into minds dulled by pride. Others, though surrounded by chaos, glowed faintly with light, because someone, somewhere, was praying for them. The contrast was stark, undeniable. Without prayer, leaders became pawns. With prayer, they could become instruments of grace. I wanted to cry out, to warn them. But my voice in that realm was unnecessary. Jesus had already spoken. Still, the urgency burned inside me. If only humanity could see what truly moved the world. If only they understood that the unseen determined the seen. I turned back toward him, trembling. Lord, my soul whispered, though words felt too small. He placed his hand upon me, and peace steadied the storm inside. Yet his face remained solemn. The reckoning approaches. What has simmered for generations will erupt. But do not fear. I have already secured the victory. Those words hit me with a force greater than any explosion. Victory was his, even if battles raged. The angels were not struggling toward uncertain outcomes. They were enforcing decrees already written in eternity. The demons fought with desperation because they knew their time was short. Still, the weight of what I saw was crushing. Nations on the brink, spiritual currents guiding decisions, humanity blind to the real battle. And through it all, the prayers of believers, like threads of light, weaving strength into the hands of angels. I felt both small and significant. Small, because the battle stretched beyond comprehension. Significant, because prayer, simple, humble prayer, shifted the tide. It wasn't strategy or weapons that mattered most. It was hearts turned toward heaven. The vision lingered, then slowly began to dissolve. But before it did, I saw one last image. A map of the world, glowing with points of light where believers prayed. Each point flared like fire, resisting waves of darkness. Some regions blazed bright, others flickered faintly, and I knew this was not metaphor. This was reality. As the scene faded, I clung to Jesus' words, etched forever into me. The true battle is unseen. Tell them to pray. The vision shifted, and suddenly I was looking down at a land far from the deserts of Gaza, America. Its vast cities glimmered like jewels from above, but as I watched, the light began to flicker. Skyscrapers, highways, neighborhoods, all appeared steady for a moment, then plunged into darkness, as though an unseen hand had snuffed them out. I saw grids collapse like dominoes. One city after another went black, not from storms, not from natural disasters, but from pulses of energy that rippled through the air. Jesus' voice whispered with solemn weight. Electromagnetic fire. Man has built his towers of pride, but they cannot stand when I remove my hand of protection. The scenes unfolded with terrifying speed. Families who had lived in comfort, depending on technology for every need, now sat paralyzed in darkness. Panic spread as phones died. Screens went blank, and engines refused to start. Shelves emptied in hours. I could feel the fear rising like smoke, the air heavy with desperation. Neighbors who once greeted each other with smiles now eyed each other with suspicion, driven by hunger and fear. I watched as people tore through stores, clawing for food, for water, for anything. A father wept in the aisle of an abandoned supermarket, clutching his daughter who whispered, "Daddy, I'm hungry." My heart broke, but Jesus' sorrow was deeper still. His voice carried grief that seemed to echo across eternity. The nation that has been blessed above all others has forgotten the source of its blessing. They trusted in wealth, in weapons, in machines, but not in me. I wanted to turn away, but he drew me closer. I saw homes once filled with laughter now fractured by chaos. Families split as fear drove them into hiding. Neighborhoods erupted into violence, people doing what they never thought possible. The comfortable illusion of security had vanished overnight, leaving only raw humanity stripped bare. Yet even as despair raged, I saw something extraordinary. Scattered throughout the darkness, there were people who glowed faintly with light. Their faces radiated peace that no storm could shatter. They weren't hiding in fear or hoarding supplies. They walked calmly through streets filled with panic, carrying themselves with quiet authority. Some prayed over the sick and watched healing flow. Others shared what little they had with hungry neighbors. Children clung to their hands, drawn to the calm in their eyes. "These," Jesus said, his voice rich with pride, "are my prepared ones. They have learned to trust me, rather than the systems of man. When everything shakes, they remain steady, because their foundation is unshakable." His words reverberated, like thunder, wrapped in tenderness. I watched as these believers became beacons in their communities. Their homes glowed with a warmth that drew others. Their prayers shifted atmospheres. Where panic ruled, peace began to spread. Churches that had stood nearly empty now overflowed as desperate souls sought answers. Men and women who had mocked faith only weeks earlier now wept at altars, confessing sins, surrendering their hearts. The contrast was staggering. On one street, chaos devoured. On the next, believers sang hymns by candlelight, their voices cutting through the darkness like blades of hope. I realized these were the true lights of the world, not powered by electricity, but by faith. Jesus turned his gaze toward me, and his words pressed deep. This is what I long for. All my children, not fear, not hiding, but faith. In the shaking, the true will be revealed. His tone carried both urgency and longing, like a father pleading with his children to trust him in the storm. The vision expanded, showing rural towns and great cities alike. In some places, I saw violence erupt, unchecked streets littered with fire, gangs roving like packs of wolves. In others, I saw revival breaking out, people flooding churches, miracles unfolding in homes, entire neighborhoods transformed by prayer. It was as though America had split into two realities. One, collapsing in chaos, the other, rising in faith. Tears welled in my eyes. The suffering was unbearable, yet the beauty of the faithful burned even brighter. I felt the weight of choice pressing on me. Humanity wasn't powerless, we had been given the chance to choose. And the dividing line wasn't wealth, status, or knowledge. It was faith. The vision dimmed, but its imprint remained seared into my soul. Jesus looked at me, his expression both fierce and tender. Tell them the time for casual belief has ended. Those who know me will shine. Those who do not will fall. I bowed my head, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the enormity of what I had seen. Yet deep inside, a fire stirred a calling, undeniable. I had been shown this, not to despair, but to warn. And in that moment, I understood. America's shaking would be both judgment and mercy. Judgment, to expose false foundations. Mercy, to awaken those still asleep. And the faithful, the glowing ones, would be his witnesses in the darkest night. The vision widened again, no longer limited to America. My gaze swept across oceans, mountains, and borders, and what I saw made my soul tremble. Entire regions convulsed with upheaval. Volcanoes that had slept for centuries suddenly erupted, spewing rivers of fire across valleys. Earthquakes shook lands that had never before felt their ground split open. Cities crumbled as if made of sand. I could hear the groaning of creation, deep and sorrowful, as if the earth itself cried out under the weight of sin. Storms howled like living creatures, pounding coasts with fury. And yet, Jesus' voice pierced the chaos. These are not accidents. These are not coincidences. Every shaking is a trumpet. Every crack in the earth is a call to awaken. But it wasn't only nature. I saw persecution rising like a flood. Believers across continents were dragged from their homes, imprisoned, mocked, silenced. Governments passed laws overnight, forbidding gatherings, forbidding the preaching of truth, even forbidding the ownership of Scripture. Faces glowed with hatred as mobs shouted, demanding compliance with systems that reeked of false peace. Yet in the midst of this oppression, I witnessed something breathtaking. Underground churches bloomed like wildflowers in hidden valleys, in basements, in caves, in forests. Believers huddled close together, their eyes shining with a joy that defied the darkness. Their voices lifted in song, quiet but fierce. Their prayers rose like fire, lighting up the heavens. I saw miracles unfold among them. The sick were healed by whispered prayers. Chains fell from the hearts of prisoners before they fell from their wrists. Children prophesied with wisdom beyond their years. Angels stood guard around these gatherings, their presence like pillars of flame, invisible to persecutors, yet undeniable to those within. Then Jesus' words came again, heavy but hopeful. Comfortable faith is ending. What is true will endure. Those who are mine will be refined in the fire, and their light will shine brighter in the darkness. His eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and triumph. I understood. This shaking was not to destroy, but to reveal. I saw false religions flourish under the protection of governments. Leaders praised systems of belief that demanded no repentance, no cross, no surrender, only empty rituals. People flocked to them, desperate for assurance without transformation. I watched officials hold ceremonies, celebrating unity, while beneath their smiles lurked shadows of compromise with darkness. But alongside these false altars, I saw fires of truth ignite. Believers who refused to bow became witnesses of glory. Their very suffering became sermons. Their steadfastness testimonies sharper than any blade. Where laws tried to silence them, their faith grew louder. Where buildings were torn down, homes became sanctuaries. Where Bibles were confiscated, Scripture lived in memory, flowing from lips like rivers. I saw young men once hardened by violence now standing fearless before crowds, proclaiming Jesus with voices unshaken. I saw women who had lost everything lifting their hands, radiating peace that pierced despair. I saw children, their innocence preserved by grace, laying hands on the broken and watching them rise. The contrast between the false and the true became clear. The false promised safety but enslaved. The true cost everything but set souls free. This was the separation Jesus had spoken of, unfolding before my eyes. The wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goats, the real and the counterfeit, all being revealed under the weight of the shaking. My heart ached with both fear and hope. Fear, because the persecution was fierce, merciless, spreading fast. Hope, because the beauty of the faithful outshone the darkness. Their light was not of themselves, but of him who walked among them. And indeed, I saw him. Jesus himself stood in their midst, invisible to enemies, yet radiant to his children. His presence filled their songs, their prayers, their courage. I realized then that persecution was not defeat. It was refining. It was the crucible that birthed unshakable faith. The underground churches were not dying, they were multiplying, empowered with miracles, strengthened with love. Their unity carried a purity that the comfortable church had long forgotten. Tears streamed down my face as I watched, and Jesus' voice echoed once more. This is the hour for which I have prepared my bride. She will emerge from the fire, more beautiful, more radiant, more faithful than the world has ever seen, and the world will know that I am with her. The vision lingered, pressing on my spirit. I knew persecution was coming. I knew suffering would spread, but I also knew that in the shaking, the true would shine. Faith would no longer be casual. It would be costly. And in that cost, the visions carried me back to a land that had always been mine, yet now I saw it with spiritual eyes. Israel, from the deserts of the Negev to the stone walls of Jerusalem, the land pulsed with an energy that felt ancient, as though every grain of dust carried prophecy. Jesus turned my gaze to the heart of it, and I understood that what was unfolding here was not only about one nation, but about the destiny of the whole world. I saw rabbis in dimly lit study halls poring over scrolls, their fingers tracing words they had recited for decades. But suddenly, light pierced their eyes. Scales fell away as if an invisible veil was torn, and they gasped as truth struck them like lightning. Yeshua, their lips trembled. They recognized the Messiah. Tears streamed down their faces as centuries of longing met the fulfillment they had resisted. It was not the persuasion of men. It was revelation from heaven. Synagogues, once closed to his name, became sanctuaries of worship, voices rising with psalms that now carried a new meaning. Men who had lived their lives debating texts now fell to their knees in surrender, their hearts ablaze with love. Women lifted their hands. Children sang with abandon. The air shimmered as if heaven itself joined their chorus. This was not a small awakening. It was a tidal wave of revelation sweeping through Israel. Yet as glory descended, persecution rose. Families split apart. Some embraced Jesus as Messiah. Others clung fiercely to tradition, unable to accept what had been revealed. Arguments turned to estrangement to betrayal. Believers were mocked, cast out, threatened. Ancient bonds strained as the truth cut through like a sword. Then the ground itself began to testify. I saw archaeological discoveries emerge from beneath the stones of Jerusalem. Hidden chambers were revealed, artifacts uncovered that confirmed every word of Scripture. Evidence long suppressed burst into the open, shaking the confidence of skeptics and silencing the voices of denial. The Ark of the Covenant itself, glowing with an otherworldly light, was brought forth from a place no human had expected. The news of it spread across the globe, igniting awe and fury alike. Jesus' voice carried both authority and tenderness. The time of Jacob's trouble draws near, but it is also the time of Jacob's deliverance. His words rang with the cadence of prophecy, ancient yet alive. The trembling of Israel would shake nations, but within it lay the promise of redemption. I saw Jerusalem surrounded by tensions, the air thick with threats of war. Enemies gathered like wolves at the edges, their weapons gleaming under the sunday. Yet angels mighty and radiant descended, forming a barrier of light around the city. Their presence shook the heavens. No missile, no army, no strategy could pierce that shield, for the Lord himself had decreed it. And then I saw him, Jesus, standing upon the Mount of Olives, not in the fullness of his return, but in vision, his robe gleaming, his eyes blazing with fire. His presence radiated authority that silenced even the whispers of demons. "This land is mine," he declared. "No power of darkness, no scheme of man can take what belongs to me." The persecution within grew harsher. Messianic believers faced trials that stripped them of homes, jobs, safety. But I saw joy in their faces, a supernatural joy that no suffering could extinguish. Their prayers carried the fragrance of eternity. Miracles multiplied among them. Blind eyes opened. The lame walked. The broken healed. Their faith drew many, even skeptics who had sworn never to believe. I saw fires of revival spreading from Jerusalem outward, leaping like sparks across nations. What began in Israel became a global awakening, pulling countless souls into the light. Yet simultaneously, hatred grew. Dark forces stirred ancient animosities, unleashing violence against God's chosen people. Demons whispered into ears, stoking wars, inflaming hatred. Jesus' sorrow pierced me. What appears to be Israel's darkest hour will become her greatest triumph. For out of the shaking, the remnant will rise, and the covenant will stand. His voice carried both warning and hope, woven together like threads of fire and gold. I trembled, overwhelmed. To see my people awaken, yet to also see the cost, it was both agony and ecstasy. But his presence steadied me, reminding me that every prophecy he had ever spoken would be fulfilled, not one word falling to the ground. The vision held me there, my soul burning with love for my land, my people, and for the one who had chosen us from the beginning. I knew then that Israel's story was not ending. It was reaching its climax. And what happened here would ripple across the world like thunder rolling from Zion. The visions swirled, folding upon themselves like scrolls of fire. I found myself standing in what looked like a vast command center, not of men, but of heaven. Angels moved with purpose, carrying scrolls glowing with divine light, their faces stern with focus, yet radiant with joy. At the center of it all, Jesus stood, his robe flowing like streams of living fire, his eyes ablaze with authority. Before me, an angel of unimaginable stature unrolled a massive scroll. Its letters burned as if written with lightning, and across its surface I read the words, "The September Awakening." The atmosphere quaked. All of heaven seemed to hush, waiting for the decree to be released. As the scroll unfurled, visions poured into me faster than thought. I saw electromagnetic pulses sweeping across cities, shutting down networks, collapsing the digital towers humanity had worshipped. Satellites plummeted from the sky like falling stars, not by human command, but by frequencies that emanated from the throne of God himself. Even the works of man's hands, Jesus said, will bow before me. I saw governments huddled in bunkers, leaders once mighty now trembling in the dark as their systems crumbled around them. Their power dissolved like sand, slipping through fingers. Some collapsed in despair, others cursed heaven, but a few fell to their knees, whispering prayers they had never uttered before. The proud were humbled, the humble exalted. Then I saw the remnant, believers hidden in obscurity, unknown by the world, now revealed in power. Their homes became havens. Their prayers shifted weather patterns. Their cupboards never emptied, though famine swept the land. They moved with a supernatural authority, not in fear but in love, serving, healing, proclaiming. Their faith burned so bright that even their persecutors could not deny the presence of God among them. I looked to Jesus, and his voice was both thunder and tenderness. This is my bride. She has been refined in fire, prepared in secret, and now she will shine. The world will see my glory through her. His face glowed with anticipation, like a bridegroom awaiting the unveiling of his beloved. The visions shifted again, and I saw cosmic signs written across the heavens. The sun pulsed with rhythms like a heartbeat. The moon shimmered in colors no eye had seen before. Stars danced into formations that spelled warnings no scientist could explain. It was as if the very sky was preaching, declaring, "Look up, your redemption draws near." And then his words struck me with finality, a weight that pressed deeper than bone. The 20th of September marks the point of no return. Those who are prepared will stand. Those who are not will be swept away. His voice carved the truth into me, undeniable, inescapable. I knew in that instant that I had been spared to bear this warning, to tell the world that time was shorter than anyone dared believe. Tears streamed from me though my body lay lifeless miles away. The burden of what he revealed pressed heavy, but alongside it burned a hope brighter than fire. This shaking was not destruction alone, it was mercy. Mercy to awaken, mercy to separate, mercy to prepare his people for the glory of his return. The scene dimmed, yet his presence remained. His hand touched my shoulder, and warmth spread through me, filling me with courage. "Tell them," he said, his voice like a whisper carried by eternity. "Tell them to repent, to believe, to prepare. For I am coming soon." In an instant, the visions collapsed into silence. I gasped, drawn violently back into my broken body on the battlefield. Air seared my lungs, medics shouted in disbelief, and life surged back through me. But though my heart beat again, I knew I was no longer the same. I had crossed the threshold of eternity, seen the sorrow and the glory, and heard the warning that could not be silenced. The fire of the vision has faded into memory, but its weight never leaves me. I tell you now, with trembling and with love, the shaking has already begun. Do not place your trust in wealth, in governments, in machines. They will crumble. Only faith will stand. Return to God while there is still breath in your lungs. Bend your knees. Whisper His name and let Him cleanse your soul. Because September is not just a page on the calendar. It is a line drawn in eternity. Some will cross into life, others into ruin. The choice rests in your heart this very moment. So I urge you, prepare. Cling to Jesus. Trust in Him. Walk in His ways. Do not wait for another sign, for you have already been given one. Time is shorter than you think, but hope is nearer than you imagine. If these words resonate with you, leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus Himself has entrusted to you.